It is about the anthropology of air, and sometimes we breathe. Um, when my mother died about 45 years ago, just the week before, she and I shared a pleasant phone conversation. I've always felt gratitude for this, that the last words I shared with my mother were loving. In contrast, my two sisters, both older, weren't so lucky. For them, my mother died while none of the three of them sent them into long-lasting emotional nosedives
You get a
of
chance,
themselves.
make it handy.
They are quite different people, my two sisters, and yet to this day, both carry wounds. Way to live in this world. And I want to explore some constructive alternatives and the happiness we find by embracing them. Let me read you Everything Changes and Ends. Things do not always go according. Pain is part of life. And the five givens. So shortly, I'm going to dive deeper into this list. But first, I want to handle an occasional reaction that the five givens are so negative, like, Bill's a downer today. Okay. And that the tone of the five givens is in the tone of an angry, grumpy parent. So let's consider some possible reactions that might be called, reactions to what might be called bad emotional weather. You can freak out, you can panic, you can get really, really angry. That's rage. You can just give up. That's despair. Or you can form, keep, and nurture a grudge and stop speaking to someone. Panic, rage, despair, or bearing a grudge. Okay, guys, don't forget to breathe. Okay. Now, none of these, I submit, are mature reactions. And of course, there is power in these reactions. There is energy released in these reactions, which makes them all great ways to crash and burn emotionally. But there is no control and no intention. So I offer the five givens in the hope that by giving you this language, you have some resources for coping with life's emotional upsets. And let's go through the list. 1, everything changes and ends. For this, I am reminded of my mother. Twice widowed, she mourned deeply when her eldest daughter left, first for college and then to marry at age 19. Everything changes and ends. Kids grow up, leave the house, launch, have lives of their own. And many of us form our identity around a working career and then retire. And we might even be that person in the family who once solved everyone else's problems. That very success can leave us alone in an otherwise empty house. Everything changes and comes to an end. I thought Franta and his family were going to live in Livermore forever. But now I've learned they're all moving to Prague. Everything changes and comes to an end. Life is like a series of flights. There is a beginning, a takeoff, a landing, and an ending. And even the most enjoyable trip or vacation comes to an end. Everything changes and comes to an end. Okay, good. I'm hearing some people breathe. Yeah, that's a good sign. Okay. 2. Things do not always go according to plan. For me, for many of us, our natural retirement role would be to be as a grandparent. But in my case, I'll never have grandchildren. I needed a new plan. Thank you for showing up, by the way. Unitarian Universalism is now part of this new plan. It's part of the current plan anyway, until things change, of course. Okay. I'm just checking how well you are doing at consuming air. Okay. I'm not doing this by sight, it's my ears. Okay. 3. Life is not always fair. Now, J.K. Rowling of Harry Potter fame was interviewed for her first post-Potter novel, The Casual Vacancy. And one of her characters was young, and if not precisely a juvenile delinquent, certainly skirting the shadows of adult authority. When this doer of not so good deeds was wrongfully accused of a bad deed, her emotions went through the roof. There is, in that reaction, the implicit assumption that the adult world is fair. But sometimes it's not. Hence her rage. And flying into a rage, that sounds like a great way to crash a plane, but not a particularly wise way to fly one. Mostly children outlive their parents. And as some of you know, I've recently encountered instances when this does not happen, that some parents outlive their children. And it happens about 3% of the time. Life is not always fair. But this doesn't mean giving up on life or freaking out. Sometimes that referee calls, or that umpire calls that ball a strike. Life is not always fair. Ask what's to be done. Sometimes that means slumping back to the dugout, head down, bat held low, but still in the game. And for you soccer fans, don't turn a yellow card into a red one. Social justice movements are built around exactly this idea. Life is not always fair. You just need to ask, what's next to be done? Okay, up to 4 now. Pain is part of life. What an inspirational sermon. But someone might say something that hurts your feelings. And it turns out, if you dwell on this insult we might call it, it hurts all over again. Buddhists call this the second arrow. Because that first one, this is the pain that life stabs you with. But that second arrow, That's the one by which you stab yourself. By dwelling on it, ruminating on it, you experience pain all over again. Which brings me to ouch. Some people have developed the reflex of saying ouch to the first arrow. And it seems to work about half the time. No second arrow if you say ouch soon enough. Little flight corrections to mild emotional gusts. Five. People are not always loving and loyal. Sometimes people react to some perceived slight or disloyalty by holding a grudge. As I've said, my mother was famous for this. I'd come home from a semester in college and never be sure to which relative or family friend we weren't speaking to. It's kind of wearing, actually. Navigating secondhand grudges of an unwitnessed insult or act of omission. And sometimes your own big brother or big sister, normally so reliable, suddenly becomes unavailable to help. I've lived on both sides of this making requests, denying requests divide. It hurts being told no, and it hurts too saying no. In a social justice context, key support sometimes comes from elected officials who might otherwise act as guardian angels, these leaders. They're subject to pressure, political, financial, or otherwise. Maybe they're elected officials, maybe they're nonprofit heads, maybe they're religious leaders, but these leaders, sometimes they just might let you down, or not show up, or even show up for the other side. Political activists say it this way: there are no permanent allies and no permanent opponents. Same concept, but different words. People are not always loyal and loving. Anyway, by recognizing this particular point, you can see how bearing grudges can become counterproductive. It just adds extra weight to an already burdened aircraft. And more broadly, recognizing these 5 givens creates for you and all of us some emotional options. Options beyond grudges, panic, rage, or despair. Seeing people as people, imperfect, not always loyal. And this world too is imperfect, not always fair, and certainly changeable. Even the best plans don't always work out. Pain is part of life. Pain is part of life. So maybe you're ready to hear that there is more hope somewhere. Yeah, that's good, you're breathing. Okay, I brought my list, presumptively incomplete, but it's a list for responding more maturely when confronted with various forms of disappointment. 1, assume good intent. Maybe that remark that seemed like such a zinger was not intended that way. Maybe there is no intentional arrow. Maybe no grounds even for saying ouch. Maybe respond with curiosity to explore intent. 2, Foster a calming breath practice. It's a form of counting to 10 before saying something. Sometimes just slowing down a reaction helps greatly. Regulate by simply reacting more slowly. Flying a plane often requires a light touch, and living a life requires a light touch too. When I breathe in peace. And when I breathe out love. Breath control and balancing postures both connect the mind and body and thereby calm the mind, control the emotions. These are the twins in the Anthropology of Air, breath and balance. Okay, I'm up to 3 now. Engage in reciting under your breath one or more of the 5 givens. In Eastern tradition, there's a word for this. It's called mantra. And over the years, I've come to really newly appreciate this subvocal practice, mantra. It's a simple technique that displaces rumination over painful moments. I remember the 5 givens with this phrase, delta F P P P. Let's practice this. Delta F P P P. Okay, the delta is sometimes used in science to denote change. Hence, everything changes and comes to an end. The F reminds us that life is not always fair. And the 3 P's stand for plans, pain, and people. As in, things do not always go according to plan, pain is part of life, and people are not always loving and loyal. Delta F P P P. Pop quiz after the service. Okay, and you can develop a meditation practice. This builds mental muscle for observing how you react to stress. Maybe for controlling your reactions, but certainly for observing them. Observe how your emotional regulation system operates. It's like getting used to one particular car or airplane. You come to understand yourself inside your own skin. And 5, develop and refine a forgiveness practice. Some people write letters, some people make phone calls, some people imagine a conversation. And the latter is especially useful for forgiving someone who has died. Forgiveness practices are the interpersonal versions of soft landings. I've just done 5, but I'm not done. And in fact, I have a personal favorite, which is number 6. Pursue the one hard thing rule. This means committing to one challenging activity like exercise or writing or the arts or political action, say, to build up one's skill in that area. And on Thursdays, I cook at a community breakfast. So I'm waking up at 5 in the morning. So a positive self-image reacts less. This is a version of the so-called gyroscopic effect, which is why it's easier to ride a bicycle that's rolling forward rather than just balancing it when you're almost still. Conservation of angular momentum That's the physics term for it. But forward momentum creates more stability. And it helps greatly to embrace this one hard thing rule before you really need it. My GP, whom I saw last week, he knows that I'm currently grieving. He said, I should find a hobby. I just smiled on the inside, man. UU keeps me pretty busy, actually. And here I stand, and I'm quoting my son here, holding humor and grief in the same breath. Okay. 7. Cultivate a growth mindset. Recasting failures as learning experiences. And it's easier to give another person slack when you yourself are actively engaged in self-improvement. For social justice work, you can mentor your future replacement. You're bringing forward the next generation, their growth, and your growth inspired by theirs. Good timing on next generation. Yeah. Anyway, that's my list. And this list, I'm still working on it, and myself. David Rico says it this way. In hero stories, the call to go on a journey takes the form of a loss, an error, a wound, an unexplainable longing, or a sense of mission. When any of these happen to us, we're being summoned to make a transition. It will always mean leaving something behind. The paradox here is that loss is the path to gain. That each loss can become a path to gain. With this idea, the Wright brothers experimented their way into inventing the airplane and the soft landing. Amen. And blessed be.